All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Bowl podcast. Today, me and Nick here about 2024 UCLA Bruins preview and prediction. Looking at this newly revamped coaching staff. Deshaun Foster gets the promotion after being on staff since 2017 as mainly the running backs coach. Eric Bieniemy makes the move from the NFL, which he had been in for over a decade, to be the offensive coordinator. Ikea Malo, the defensive line coach a season ago, also his third year on staff, takes over for the departing Dalton Lynn. Chip Kelly bolts for essentially a lesser role. Obviously, offensive coordinator at Ohio State, but leading your own program obviously is more desirable. 3 straight 8+ win seasons, though, for the Bruins. It looks like Kelly just had enough, Nick, and I think it really comes down to a lot of NIL. And obviously UCLA don't really have much of a home environment. They still have some nice resources being in Southern California, but I think this is just totally centered on NIL. We've seen a lot of head coaches bolt this past offseason for, well, again, we would consider lesser roles when they could have led their own program. What do you make of Chip departing, and do you think it's centered around that, or do you think he just saw the writing on the wall and decided to get out, despite some recent success?
I certainly can't blame Chip Kelly for bolting for Ohio State, where he gets to focus on calling plays, doesn't have to worry about the dynamics of being a head coach. The NIL era has made head coaching being a lot more difficult. We've seen it with other programs. We saw, Boston College, their head coach bolted for a coordinator role. So this is something that happens in this game. To be honest, Chip Kelly didn't have an incredible amount of success based off what you would hope he would have had at UCLA. The home atmosphere, the fan support is not incredible at UCLA. The resources, yes, they are there, but in general, it's a tough place to win in this environment. Now they head to a tougher conference where the task was only going to get a lot more difficult as time went on. They left the Pac-12, and now things were going to be a lot more difficult for Kelly, and I think he saw the writing was on the wall. And now he heads to Ohio State, where he has an incredible amount of offensive talent at his disposal to draw up his type of plays. Like I said, be a little more less focused on the outside things and just focus on calling plays and drawing up and being that great offensive coordinator and great offensive mind that he always has been in the past at his previous stops in college and the NFL. I think this move will work out well for him. I don't know how well UCLA will do. Now they bring in a whole new staff that does have some NFL experience on here as well as some guys that are veterans to college games. So this staff could be solid. I just think it's going to be a tough transition heading into a new conference.
Looking at the UCLA offense, a unit that was, average last year, we certainly expected them to fall off a good bit, but definitely thought they would be better. Thought they had a pretty sound quarterback room with 3 different options. More transfers out. Colin Schweel really didn't end up getting on the field, and they end up settling with Ethan Garbers, who, played pretty well. 67% comp rate on about 150 attempts. 11 touchdowns with 3 picks. So obviously he was taking care of the football. He has the size, the mobility to escape the pocket. Needs to show better ability when it comes to pushing the ball downfield, though. Does have above average arm strength, but it isn't great by any means. Took care of the ball. Figured to be a clean game manager for the most part, but this year he's really going to have to elevate his game. Justin Martin, a 4-star in the class of 22, is his backup. 3 career snaps to his name. 6'4", 220, though, elite size there. He's a good athlete. And then, senior Chase Griffin's in the room, but hasn't really played much either in his career. What do you make of this quarterback room's developments, Nick? Again, I thought Colin Schweel would have been a really good starter for them last year. Didn't get on the field at all, and when he did, he was awful. More transfers out after a pretty annoying recruitment from him when he didn't play very good this past year. And again, they're now with Garbers, who I considered to be number 3 last year coming into the season. Now he's going to be number 1, and again, has to really elevate this offense.
A complete mess of a quarterback room last year. It didn't make a whole lot of sense with Dante Moore. His decision-making seemed very questionable. He ends up transferring back out after really not looking great last year. Colin Schweel transfers out as well. You see him move on, and now it really just comes down to, Ethan Garbers is going to be the guy. He had a 67% comp rate in limited appearances, 1,100 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, 3 picks. Certainly better than Moore, who had a way worse comp rate and more interceptions. So I think Garbers can be a really strong quarterback for this offense, but I think this is just kind of a weird thing that may also play into part why Chip Kelly left, because he had to deal with the headache that Moore, where he flipped his commitment originally to UCLA and then ended up playing there, not looking great, being a bit of a headache in the locker room, then transferring immediately after. Just a bit of a weird, messy situation. Now Garbers comes in. He's got size, very solid in the pocket, nice mobility. I think he's going to have the opportunity to grow and be a star quarterback. I do like him to be pretty solid this year, not going to be earth-shattering or anything, but I think he will be a solid, serviceable quarterback this year.
Yeah, and Garbers, 2 picks in the season opener against Coastal Carolina. The only other interception came against Colorado, where Travis Hunter made an unreal play. So, that's not too shabby there. He was able to protect the ball in any other regard. You look at this running back room, TJ Harden, a well-built back, some suddenness when changing directions, solid initial cuts, showing some good vision. Doesn't have much speed or yards after contact. Doesn't really hit the hole all that fast. Just another average running back, I would say here. 6'2", 215, LA native. Carson Steele, of course, going after, a pretty good season. But Harden still had 827 yards. Nice 1-2 punch there at running back a season ago, of course. I think Keegan Jones is going to fill in as the number 2. A versatile player, 5'10", 185. Should see most of his time in form of the backup running back, because he has played some wide receiver at times. Deshaun Morrell hasn't seen much playing time since arriving as a 4-star running back in the class of 21. They're really not the deepest or most skilled room, Nick, and obviously the scheme certainly allowed them to run the ball better than they should at times, about 200 yards per game last season. Schleal was, a third leading rusher for them. Obviously that threat is now gone. I think this rushing attack is in for a major regression, nowhere near the DTR, Zach Charbonnet days they had 2 seasons ago.
This is a unit that has some solid pieces, but they're not going to be anywhere near where they have been in the past. I think Harden is a good back, 827 yards on the ground for him last year, 5.3 yards per carry, 8 scores, also had 19 grabs and a touchdown out of the backfield. Then you have Keegan Jones who had 152 yards and 10.9 yards per carry and 2 scores for him. Then you also have further down the depth chart and Deshaun Morrell, who, was he going to look like? Is he going to have some opportunity to get some touches this year? There's no real standout here. I think, you lean towards Harden being that number 1 guy, but Jones and Morrell, they're going to kind of split the carries for number 2 backs. This is a running back room that's not phenomenal. It's got some decent pieces with Harden there, but in general, I don't think they're going to light the world up on the ground this year.
You look at the wide receiver room, Jake Michael Sturdivant, probably the best player on this roster. He's a very good player, good length, 6'3", 202 pounds. Covers good ground as a strider, physicality that allows him to really create and win at the top of his routes. Good ability in the intermediate range with speed. Fake out moves and the ability to find creases and zone really stands out. He went from 11 drops down to only 3 this past season, so worked on his focus a great deal. Does struggle to separate vertically, though, but this is a very good pass catcher. Regardless of the production, this is a talent that's going to play in the NFL. Logan Loya, a pure slot threat that thrives at finding pockets in zone, was greatly reliable back half of the season for them. Also has punt returning qualities, 5'11", 185 there. Titus Malquillo didn't play this past season. Figures to step into a starting lineup role. Rico Flores played 200-plus snaps as an outside wide receiver for Notre Dame. Made a lot of big plays for them in the back half of the year. Kawazi Gilmore, 4-star true freshman from Sierra Canyon, figures to find some time in a room, with the lack of depth. And Malika Matova at tight end, 6'6", 263 pounds, was the third leading pass catcher. Solid room overall that can lead to some respectable production. I don't think this is a room that's going to set anybody on fire when it comes to wide receiver. I think Sturdivant and Loya's good. I think Flores will be a good addition. And the tight end has some pretty ridiculous size, Nick. But the depth is not very good. And I'm just not really sure what kind of consistency we'll see from this passing attack.
I worry about the depth, certainly, but I think, Loya is a really solid player, top training pass catcher, 655 yards, receiving 11.1 yards per grab and 5 scores. Michael Sturdivant, 597 yards, 16.6 yards per grab and 4 scores. Really good physical player, one of the nation's more underrated wide receivers, a really solid player, probably the best player on this team. I think is a very exciting, fun player to watch. And then Matevo, the tight end, 283, 20.2 yards per grab and 2 scores for him. Plus they added some pieces out of the portal. This is a room that I think is okay. Rico Flores Jr. is one of those good ads from Notre Dame. This is a room that lacks depth. I do think the top headliners are pretty solid. They lack a lot of depth, which certainly can be an issue for this unit. But overall, there are some solid pieces here. I think Loya in the slot and Sturdivant at the X are 2 really good building blocks.
To the offensive line, they lose their left tackle, Bruno Fina, who was one of the nation's worst pass blockers, so that's not really a loss. Is it Michael Carmody from Notre Dame? Didn't play a season ago, but figures to be an immediate upgrade. Spencer Holstage, a left guard, was impressive. Gets loose in pass blocking at times. Remains a good run blocker. Overall, a good asset there. Sam Yoon will take over for Duke Clemens at center, who was a great player for them. That's a major loss. Only has a few snaps under his belt at 6'5", 280. Josh Carlin at right guard was a stout pass blocker. Needs to improve his game in the run blocking department. And then Garrett DiGiorio started all season, but also strode bad in pass protection, 6'6", 310. They returned 3 starters up front. This team was 122nd in sacks allowed. Offensive line struggled a good bit. But they showcase good ability in the run game with athleticism and being able to fill the scheme. I think the 2 guards are pretty solid here, Nick, but the rest of these guys will need to step up. Pass protection needs to improve heavily. It could be a bad storm all around if the quarterback position struggles and these guys can't improve also.
This offensive line certainly could be a very major red flag if these guys don't step up. I think the guard play, like you said, Holstage at left guard is really solid, but not incredible. In pass block, he does have some issues occasionally as well. I think the right guard, Josh Carlin's a guy that can be really solid, a good leader for this. When you look at the interior, or the other part of the interior, the center, that is Sam Yoon, I'm a little worried about him. And then the tackles, I'm very worried about the tackles. Not sure what the tackle play is going to look like This offense has a lot of red flags and question marks. They weren't phenomenal last year, and they don't return a lot of production. The offensive line concerns me as well. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball at the same clip they were last year. I am slightly concerned about this offense.
Verdict for the Bruins, a solid unit overall as they have a few good pass catchers, return a few quality guys up front, and they're riding with the hot hand at quarterback. Running back room really isn't all that skilled. Harden should have a good season, I think, but production's going to take a slight step back without Kelly as the play caller. Michael Sturdivant is the only one I'd consider to be a weekly game-changing talent on this offense. Is the real problem. There's just not enough guys I think can make an impact very often. Defensive side of the ball, this is a unit I expected to be really improved this past year, but I didn't think they would be elite like they were. Top 15 in 3 different areas. Phenomenal against the run, second nationally, and that's no joke. They had legit ball players up front. Problem is those guys all depart. They only lost 5 guys in the portal, added 10, so this unit certainly is going to see some revamp in terms of talent. Returning only 4 starters. Looking at the D-line, again, elite players depart. The Murphy twins, Liatu Latu. They do get a few vets back, though, led by Jay Toai, 6'3", 325. He was their admirable run stopper, but was a pretty poor tackler. Gary Smith at 6'2", 315, on the other hand, was a really impressive player for them. Did see less than 300 snaps. Keenan Kanu Williams at 6'5", 310 was good in the same amount of snaps. Seteveni Havile at 295. Saw about 100 snaps and will be a key cog in the rotation. You look at this pass rush, Devin Apui didn't see the field really at all over the last 3 years. I love the addition of Jacob Busick from Navy, who's a really good player for them, a well-built athlete. Has been productive, but only saw 3 games last year. Disciplined player, really good at here. Also picked up Joseph Vaughn, who's been a good run defender for Yale over the past 2 years. Unique size in columns, Achu Wapong, 6'7", 270, but no career snaps while at Miami. I think the run D will take a good step back. But this D-line, I think, overall is sound, but the production is destined to fall off, Nick, when you lose elite players.
They were second in the nation at 80.7 rush yards per game given up last year. I think you're going to see a drop-off in that production. That was an incredible number, really, when you think about it. But this is still a unit that has some solid pieces. Jay Toai, 28 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1 sack for him. Gary Smith, 21 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. Keanu Williams, 14 total tackles, half a sack for him as well last year. Jacob Busick's a really solid add from Navy, underrated player from that add from Navy. I think he's going to be a really strong, physical, disciplined player coming off the edge there. Joseph Van is a decent add as well, who could be potentially involved in this pass rush. This is a unit that's not terrible. They're just not phenomenal. They're not going to be anywhere near where they were last year. This is a really good defense against the run. I'm not entirely sure how elite they're going to be this year because the interior does have some question marks for me, as does the exterior of this defensive line. But overall, there are some solid pieces here.
I think the linebacking group's pretty solid. Kane Medrano really stepped up in the middle. Should emerge as a great leader this season with sound versus the run, capable pass rusher as well. Alu Adajayo was an even better run defender, played lots of snaps, was the third leading tackler on this team. John Vaughns, he's been in the program a long time, a quality player. He and Ali Kaho will be the backups. Good part of this defense here, I would say, in the middle. Of course, they lose a nice starter, Darian Mosau, who was very productive for them. But when you're getting back, the guys who are second and third on the team in tackles, I think that's certainly going to be a plus for the future, and it's certainly going to be great for these younger guys on this lineup.
They certainly return a nice tackling player in Madonna, who's really solid. 56 total tackles for him, 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Really good numbers there. That they return a good physical player at linebacker. You can move him around. Very flexible player, solid leader for this defense. The rest of this linebacking core has some solid players. Olu Aladu is a solid piece to return a guy who doesn't play a whole lot, but a guy that can play at middle linebacker and get some snaps this year. I think this is a decent unit with Moderno stepping up and being that leader.
You look at the secondary, I was pretty happy with what I thought I would see from this side of the ball last year. And Deonton Lynn did great wonders with the secondary. Again, they do lose a lot of those guys. A couple of them going to USC, following him over there. They do return Jalen Davies, though. He was an elite run defender. Did allow 666 yards in coverage, but should really grow with an outside corner. Devin Kirkwood on the other side was better in coverage and was also a good tackler. Kane Clark was solid in a few snaps. He saw while the other backup, Jaden Marshall, didn't play. Complete makeover at safety. What was a position of strength for them a year ago. Added 2 transfers in Brian Addison. He was pretty sound for Oregon in 2022. Entering his 7th season of college football, though, so you certainly wonder what ceiling is left for him. Vermont Henderson played for Notre Dame a year ago. Has experience, but was never all that impressive for the Irish. Backups Croc Stewart and Clint Stevens only played in 3 games each. Much like the defensive line, Nick, they're losing some really good talent. And this time around, though, with this part of the unit, is they're losing them to the cross-town rivals, and they're adding some guys from Oregon, Notre Dame, some solid returnees at corner. But I think overall, this is another part of the defense that's probably going to step back. A lot of untested depth. It's probably not going to be ideal for them.
Davies 43 total tackles, 6 pass breakups, a pick for him. Really good run defender. I think if you're going to see this team have solid run defense again this year, it's going to rely on Davies. Kirkwood 24 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups for him. They do lose a lot in the secondary. They add some solid players. I think Henderson, Addison, Wallace are all decent adds, guys that have had success at different programs across the country. But in general, this is just a tough look for this unit because they lose a lot of different players. The coaching overhaul will certainly be a part of this. They gave up 220 pass yards per game last year. You would think they're going to probably give up more than that this year. They were 61st in the nation, certainly the weakest part of this defense. And I think this pass defense is not going to be any better this year. I think they are in line for a bit of a drop.
And the verdict for this side of the ball, again, I expected them to be pretty good last year, and they greatly improved and even shattered my expectations, but an elite D-line loses key components. Lynn moves across town, and the talent exodus overall is just going to be hard to overcome. Sizable step back in store, but they do have good corners, good size on the interior D-line still. Of course, 2 starting linebackers coming back is helpful for them. Final prediction for the Bruins, they're in a tough spot as Kelly gives up while an elite defense loses all the reasons why they were so good. Offense just seems to lack firepower. I'm not fully convinced Garbers is going to be able to provide above average play on a consistent basis over the course of a difficult schedule. I also think Foster is a young players coach. They were excited when he was announced as the hire, but he's going to struggle in the first year in terms of getting this team to play at a high level consistently. Likely going to lean on Bieniemy a ton for insight. Winning games is just going to be very difficult this season for them. I think it's going to be a lack of talent and a lack of coaching combined together, even with a bright mind that was in the NFL, Nick. That doesn't always lead to a smooth transition by any means. Schedule's difficult. LSU, Oregon, Penn State, 3-game stretch right there I think they'll lose. I think Indiana and Minnesota can even be tough for them. And I see them, losing pretty much the entire back half of their schedule to get a freebie against Fresno State. Maybe they can pick off Washington or USC, but I don't see them being able to compete with their Rutgers defense. Going on the road to Nebraska, and this year's team will be tough. Iowa's absolutely going to smoke them on this side of the ball, or in terms of defense, that is. C-plus offense, a B defense, and that's kind of being generous, Nick. 4-8 for the both of us. I think, hammering the under on this team's pretty much a lock. Again, I just think it's going to be hard for them to win football games for a variety of reasons.
I think this team's in line for a tough struggle this year under a new look coaching staff. Chip Kelly bolts. This team ends up in a new conference, and they really they seem to be the weakest team heading into the Big Ten out of all the teams heading in the Big Ten from the Pac-12. They seem to be kind of that odd man out where it's like, are they going to be able to be competitive in this new conference? Is this really a good move for the football team? Is this more of a move for the other sports that UCLA has, where they have been solid at some other sports over the past couple of seasons? Tough schedule out of conference playing LSU. I mean, that's a really tough draw. Certainly on the road in Death Valley. Out of conference is tough at Hawaii as well. It's certainly an interesting game. Tough road trip to get out there. I know it's a little bit closer to LA, but still, that's a decent flight across the Pacific Ocean for them. You might want to circle that one week 1. Look at the spread on that. Maybe take a flyer on the Hawaii points if you're really feeling risky late night. If you live on the East Coast, I think at Penn State, at Rutgers, at Washington, at Nebraska, all very tough road draws, even if Washington is totally rebuilding and you don't really know what you're going to expect out of Rutgers and Nebraska this year. This is a tough schedule. I am at 4-8 like you do. I think they're a team that could be potentially good in the future, but this is a tough schedule, tough year. The offense, I got a lot of question marks. The defense, I got a lot of question marks. Will be a long season for the Bruins.
Yeah, that's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. As always, appreciate you joining me, giving some solid insight here on the Bruins.
Looking forward to watching this team as they transition to the Big Ten.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.